welcome to another edition of USISPF Conversations. I am delighted to be joined by Vishal Mahadevia, Managing Director, Head of India, Global Head of Financial Services at Warburg Pincus, but more importantly, also a board member here at USISPF. Vishal, thank you so much for making time this evening.
Thanks, Akshobh. Good to see you.
More importantly, you recently led USISPF's capital market delegation right now, leading a team of an eclectic mix from private equity to bankers to all sort of financial whizzes to meet senior ministers, senior government officials. What was the genesis about this, and how did you go about thinking about this process? And perhaps, and more importantly, what were the policy outcomes you were hoping to achieve?
Yeah, sure. So, look, I really give full credit to USISPF for this one with Maliki and the team on the ground here really reached out, I guess, a few months ago. And this was the first time USISPF has ever pulled together a capital markets delegation to say, let's go meet senior government officials, ministers. And the thinking behind it, which I think is even more true today, is it's a really exciting time in India, as you mentioned. Keeping apart G20, B20, all the things. It's this unique moment in time where India feels like it's got a really strong hand of cards. The whole world's looking to India. There's a tremendous spotlight, a lot of hype about the India opportunity, and therefore a great chance to be welcoming to and attract large pools of global capital, which India needs to continue to develop and get to that $5 trillion and $10 trillion economy. So we had a terrific uptake of meetings. The delegation was able to go out there, meet with officials, really think about different ideas that can move the needle in terms of ways to attract more capital into the country. What are some of the issues we're hearing from our peers otherwise? And again, USISPF did a terrific job, not only setting up the meetings, but then setting up the discussions in a manner that were open, transparent, and very engaging. So a really terrific experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you mentioned in terms of moving the needle, as India celebrated 76 years recently, but people often forget that India is economically just a little over a 30-year story with the 91 reforms. And in that landmark, it's made phenomenal strides, not just a G20, it's a G5 economy. And, as touted by many financial institutions, even like yourselves, will be a G3 soon enough and a G2 somewhere down the neck of the woods. It's fascinating because 20 years ago, there was a whole campaign called Incredible India just on tourism. And now it's like Credible India just on the economic size. And one of the aspects that I'm sure is coming out is digital and financial payments. A country that was seen as cash-based economy to one that's the ubiquity of UPI. This is a very phenomenal task in a country like India, hasn't it?
Yeah, look, I think it was a big part of the conversation. Digital payments. I think the whole shift to digital India from the informal to the formal economy. And that's been going on now for 7 or 8 years, right? Since the first set of reforms that the government put in place from Aadhaar to what, everyone calls the India stack that sits out there, UPI, which is the Unified Payment Interface. You got GST, which was pretty path-breaking when it finally got implemented in India. All of these came with short-term pain, but you're really starting to see the benefits of it now, and businesses seeing it. Look, digital payments, these, the statistics are out there. From 5-6 years ago, it was less than 2% of GDP. It's now 72% of GDP. Only 50 smartphone penetrations up from 24 to 59%. It's still only 59%. There's a long way to go. So I think both the progress India has made, but also the momentum and that positive optimism about what can happen. Now, look, we also talked about the challenges, right? We all know the positive side of the Indian story, but the reason we have these delegations and we can have open discussions is what are the challenges our members are facing? What are the obstacles? What are the questions we hear? Warburg Pincus is a private equity fund. We hear these questions from our investors around India. And, when we talked, we could be quite open. I would give the example of 10 years ago. If you went to a room with 10 investors in the US, maybe 3 of them actually wanted to talk about India. The others had like a list of 10 other things that were more important. Today, that instead of 3 people, there's probably 7 out of the 10 that want to talk about India. But The other four that you just added all either have a bad experience from the past in India or know someone who had a bad experience. So we've got our own history to sort out. And I think this government and the officials and the people we spoke to all acknowledged it. And I think that learning not to go into our own echo chamber in India and to have the proclivity to go back and score our own self goal, as I put it, I think is high up on people's mind. We'll see how that goes. But we talk both about the opportunities as well as some of the challenges, I'm sure.
Yeah. Staying on the challenges for a brief moment, being in India, you know the lay of the land well, and no pun intended on the infrastructure part. But that's one of the things that we speak about, wanting deeper capital markets and this laggard between the lacunas of what we need in a developing economy and the developed economy is infrastructure investment. And do you see that with sense of bullishness now in the next 10 years, more infrastructure and deeper capital markets for infrastructure projects, the way the government has picked up with National Logistic Pipeline and Gati Shakti and a whole bunch of other schemes?
Yeah, look, I think the infrastructure in India has been a tale of two stories. You've had greenfield infrastructure development, and then you've had infrastructure financing, what I'll call as a completed infrastructure project that then chases hands and provides a fantastic yield to that next set of investors. And I think global investors have found the former very tough. Taking greenfield risks, the risk rewards haven't shaken up as people had expected. But on the latter, and then that might come with a smaller amount of greenfield and growth, etc., it's been very successful. InvITs, infrastructure investment trusts, reforms by the government to allow these different pools of capital to come in and earn a yield, I think has really opened up the door for a lot more capital to come in. So I think in our discussions it was very clear that the government would like to attract capital for infrastructure. I think the challenges we talked about is in order to develop it, that development cycle may need to come from the government. And so they're building highways like crazy. I mean, it's amazing the job the government has done building highways. But once they're built, they go out and try to monetize it as a yield asset to a global investor base, take that capital and use it to develop the next set of highways. So that's actually a pretty interesting model that's been in place out here and hopefully continues to lead more traction.
Do you see outcomes from the G20 right now really focused on, enriching economies for the global south and perhaps bridging the deficit from where we were perhaps 5 years ago to where we could be 5 years from now?
I think two things were very clear. So when we had the delegation, the end of our delegation coincided with the start of the B20,
Mm.
which I also joined for part of it. It's very clear from a business perspective and even from the G20 perspective, climate change, a push on investment towards more renewables, a push towards EVs, towards battery manufacturing. All of that is top of mind for this government. I think it's top of mind for the agenda for the G20. And I think, look, there's two aspects of the empowerment. And I'd say, I'll talk about the first one that you asked. No question in terms of ensuring that the benefits of this trickle down to a large part of the pyramid here in India. And as you look at the global south and frankly the world over, it's a big challenge and a big opportunity and clearly something that was top of agenda, both for the B20 and the G20. The other I'd say is women empowerment. As you look at the global south and you look at India in particular, and I've said this before and we talked a bit about it, we've really achieved this economic growth getting to G5. I liken it to with one hand tied behind our back. Women participation in the workforce still remains pretty abysmal here in India and in many countries in the global south. And I think if you can unleash that, and I won't admit that there are ideas, but I think it is one of the focus items of the G20, B20, and hopefully things come out of it that really can provide an economic fillip over the next decade.
So Vishal, if I could get you to wear your economist hat for a second, and as someone who's lived both in the West and India and seen the lacunas of India that is and India can be, and we're coming up to almost 10 years of the current government, and you've seen a lot of focus schemes towards manufacturing and PLI, digital payments, infrastructure, sustainable development. what more do you think needs to be done, or perhaps what would you like sectors to be focused on more for India to kind of accelerate towards a G3 or G2? There's an inevitability of that happening, but perhaps to get there faster, what would be your vision for the next 5, 10 years?
Yeah, I think look, the one sector where I feel there's a lot of sectors, as you rightfully said, India is starting from a base where there's just upside and potential in every sector and possibility you look at. But the one place you would love to see less from a business perspective, from a government perspective, more investment in the education sector. If we don't have strong education, if we don't have strong skilling, and there was a fantastic session organized by the USISPF with one of our board members, Johnny Taylor, and we had Minister of State for Skilling, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, and we had a fantastic event just talking about skilling. How do you help the workforce for a brand new, brave new world with artificial intelligence, with different skills required? And I think broadly, as you look at education and skilling, that should be a sector where you could have more of a focus both from government and also a chance for private players to help improve and drive that piece. So that's a sector that I would say less as an investment opportunity, but more as a sector of focus that we need in order for India to get to the G3, G2.
Absolutely. The machines are here, so we need to up our intelligence for artificial intelligence. Last but not least, thank you for this conversation and for this capital markets delegation that you led. What next? Or what is there another one that that's gonna come in the horizon? And what happens from here right now? Future delegations.
I think it's a great question. I think the first step for us is the follow up. Every meeting, really with an engaging conversation, every government official, every minister came back and said, we really want to know more. Please follow up. We would like to know more detail on these points that you raised. We would like to have more engagement. So I think this is something we really should repeat. Whether it's every 6 months, whether it's every year, maybe it's more frequent upfront. But there's a desire from, I think, everyone we met from the side of the government to engage more. They want to hear more. They may not always agree with what we say. They're very honest about it, but they do want to hear and they want to engage. And it was quite transparent. So I think more communication, more engagement is welcome from their side. And I think, frankly, given the relationships USISPF built, it really gives us an open opportunity to do that. So that's what I see.
Well, Vishal, thank you so much for being the commercial diplomat between US and India, and perhaps the key bridge bulwark between the private sector and the public sector, and helping play a part. And like so many of us have to get to that G3, G2, as you said. Vishal, thank you so much for your time and all these wonderful insights.
Thanks, Akshobh. That was great. Great to see you. Bye.